Alright guys, you know what? I can no longer hold my tongue. Let's talk about the attacks on Brussels. Here we go.
ISIS claiming responsibility for the terror attacks that rocked Brussels, killing at least 34 people and injuring more than 200. And now the terror group warns that more attacks are coming. So what can the U.S. do to combat this growing threat? NAWAZ is a former Islamic extremist and the author of Radical: My Journey Out of the Islamist Extremism. He knows the mindset behind this kind of terror, and he joins us now to weigh in. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
A pleasure.
What were your initial thoughts when you heard this unfolding just hours ago, these almost simultaneous attacks happening in Belgium?
Well, all of us who follow these issues on a daily basis were expecting these attacks. Unfortunately, we knew they were coming. ISIS warned Belgium specifically in February that they would be next. So the Belgian authorities knew these were coming as well. And actually what that tells us is that it doesn't bode well for the future, because the Belgian authorities were working round the clock to try and prevent such attacks. And even despite that, they found that they were unable to prevent this tragedy unfolding in Brussels yesterday.
And how big is the threat that this will come here, and how do we avoid it?
I think what we're facing is a global jihadist insurgency. This month in March alone, we've had 7 other attacks in 7 other cities, 2 in Pakistan, 2 in Turkey, 1 in the Ivory Coast, 1 in Nigeria, and 1 in Mali. So there's an unprecedented level of an insurgency involving Islamist extremism around the world today. And I think it's reaching levels that we are yet to fathom, that we as civil society, as the international community, and as Western governments are yet to fully comprehend. And it's unfortunate and very sad for me to sit here and say to you that actually there will be, almost certainly there will be more attacks coming this year as well.
This should be a wake-up call to the Western world as a whole. This is a former, shall we may even say, I guess, borderline terrorist, openly saying that this fight is not over. Say whatever you like about Fox News, but this man is a former radical Islamic extremist, and he is more than happy to say that there will be more attacks. This idea that we can just give amnesty to people who clearly want to hurt us is ridiculous.
In the United States, what's more likely currently, as the State Department is warning, is that there are going to be more attacks on the continent of Europe. We in the United Kingdom have been incredibly lucky. We're in fact overdue an attack here, but perhaps because of the separation between us and the continent of Europe in the form of the English Channel, and the fact that the border here does have checks coming into the UK. We're not part of the Schengen system. It's a lot more difficult for those returning fighters to get back into the UK, despite the fact that even from the UK up to 2,000, anything between 800 to 2,000 British citizens have also gone to join ISIS.
This is a wake-up call to Europe. Listen to me very clearly. In the past year alone of 2015, there have been literally over 1 million migrants coming into the EU. We don't have enough resources for them because resources are finite. And in this past 2 months, 130,000 something have been coming in. We don't have room. And when I say we don't have room, I know I live in heaven, where we have unlimited resources, but Earth is not heaven. We Earthlings, because I'm currently possessing some idiot that doesn't look very good, do not have unlimited resources. You Earthlings don't have them. This is called realisticness. You have to be a realist about this kind of stuff.
While reporting on the recent horrific terror attacks in Paris, we realized with a shock that the band playing at the Bataclan, the venue where 89 people lost their lives, was actually the Eagles of Death Metal, a band that Vice has worked with many times. Now, the band haven't spoken about it before, but agreed to come to our LA office and talk about their experience and the friends and the fans that they tragically lost that night. So let's start at the beginning.
I'm not going to show you guys the entire clip. I'm not even going to show most of this video, but I will link it in the description below. The fact of the matter, guys, is that this is referring to the attacks on Paris, France that happened in November. They were clearly connected because ISIS claimed victory and claimed responsibility for these attacks. Now, all of a sudden, 6 months later, after we arrest one of the key figureheads who helped orchestrate this attack, now, all of a sudden, and people are saying, well, they're not connected. No, that is a lie. If you look at this article right here, guys, Sweden is apparently more than willing to forgive jihadists and give them open border policies that allow them to have homes and government food, just so that way they can keep looking so humanitarian, so nice. This is why we, people looking down at you from heaven, are so disappointed. Because we know this doesn't work. When someone's evil, we send them to hell. What do you guys do?
Thanks very much for joining us. I want to talk to you about the terror attacks in Brussels today. If you were president of the United States, what steps would you take right now to prevent these kinds of attacks from happening here in the United States?
Well, I'd immediately strengthen our borders, as I've been talking about for a long period of time, and I would be very, very strong on visas, and I'd be very, very probably end a lot of them, and I'd be very strong, and especially coming from certain parts of the world, which, as you know, I've spoken about, and I've been criticized in some circles for, and I've been praised in other circles for. But this is a problem. Radical Islamic terrorism is a major problem, and we have a president that won't even mention the term, won't mention the words, and he's making a terrible mistake. This is radical Islamic terrorism.
Would you continue to support at least a temporary ban on all Muslims coming into the United States?
Well, you have no choice, and you're going to make certain exceptions, and you're going to make exceptions on heads of state and certain people, and I'm not saying you don't do that, but we have a real problem, and people don't have any idea what's going on. We have a government that's impotent. We have a government that doesn't get it. But we have a real problem, Wolf, and we have a government that doesn't understand what's happening.
Consider this, you guys. Consider this. Donald Trump. Yes, right, Donald Trump. Not exactly the smartest person out there, and probably one of the dumbest presidential candidates there is actually making some legitimate points about this attack. The fact of the matter is that we cannot let everyone in. In fact, just like how Sweden is more than willing to let jihadists in, the EU is doing a very dumb thing by saying we have to let all these people in with no checks. And according to quite a few sources, these people, many of whom aren't even Syrian, many of these people are just economic migrants, simply coming in here. ISIS has said many times over that they will take advantage of the migrant crisis in order to put more Syrian refugees in. They want to put people in who have ties to ISIS. Because yes, some Syrians really do. People from all over the world who support ISIS are being used. So, let's not pretend that this is all okay.
European citizens have spent the last 2 years voting to reject the failed policies of multiculturalism and mass immigration. So isn't it an amazing coincidence how left-wing parties in Europe who will benefit from votes from future naturalised migrants and their children have been so welcoming of them? Being completely dependent on government, those naturalised citizens will then vote for even bigger government. Big corporations also love mass immigration. It means a fresh supply of cheap labour that will drive down everyone else's wages. So who else benefits? Economic migrants who are abusing the crisis by claiming to be Syrian refugees when they're clearly not. As the Sydney Morning Herald reports, 90% of those arriving in Serbia from Macedonia say they're Syrian but have no documents to prove it. 90%. They're finding discarded ID cards belonging to Pakistanis and Bangladeshis. These people aren't fleeing war. They're not running from ISIS. They're trampling on the backs of legitimate Syrian refugees in an effort to try and suck off Europe's giant welfare state. And then you have the Syrians themselves. Isn't it an amazing coincidence how many of these war refugees have no interest whatsoever in remaining in peaceful European countries that refuse to shower them with cash. And many of the refugees don't even look like refugees at all. They're mainly working age men, well fed, not emaciated, not hungry. They're not wearing rags. Many of them are even carrying the latest iPhone. And I don't begrudge people seeking a better lifestyle, but can we please stop pretending that all these individuals are fleeing from war? What makes someone a refugee is that they're fleeing from danger, not fleeing to a higher standard of living. What on earth has Pakistanis flooding into Sweden to get on benefits got to do with actual Syrians escaping ISIS persecution? And
like I just showed you in this article, many countries, including Sweden, have the stupidest policy ever where they are actually giving jihadists a break. Give me a break. This is not going to work. Mass multiculturalism doesn't work. It's all simply just a welfare state policy. That's all it is. And this is very much basically the destruction of the West, giving people who clearly have earned nothing everything. In the end, guys, we all knew what was going to happen. We knew that this was going to be a failed system. We knew that this mass multicultural immigration thing, where we give away land and money to people without checking who they are, when ISIS clearly wants to abuse them, doesn't work. And this is the utter consequence that we face as human beings now, that we have to take responsibility for our actions. And if we don't, Europe is going to die. And think about this. Donald Trump said something intelligent about this issue. Donald Trump is more key on what's going on in Brussels than anyone else. Think about that. And he's right. We can't let more Muslims into this country right now. That's a scary thing to think. I'll leave you with this.
What do you say to the millions of Muslim Americans who are very patriotic, loyal Americans, many of whom have sons and daughters who serve in the U.S. military, who feel they would be discriminated against if these policies went forward?
I say we have a problem. We have a radical Islamic terrorism problem. That's what I say. I have to say that. We have a problem like we've never had before. This is a problem that has gone on. General Pershing had the problem in 1919 in the Philippines with radical Islamic terrorism, and he handled it a certain way. I think you probably know that story. It's a very gruesome story, but you know what? The problem didn't exist for 48 years after that happened. So we have to be a lot tougher than we are. Right now, they look at us as weak, soft, stupid people. Look at the scene on CNN right now, all the bodies all over the floor, and we're worried about waterboarding.
Mr. Trump, I know you got to go, but thanks very much for joining us. We'll continue these conversations down the road.